Welcome, beloved trailblazers. The most dangerous person in any story is the one everyone underestimates. Let that truth resonate within you. History has been forged, not by the ostentatious, the flamboyant, or the clamorous, but by the unnoticed, the silent architects, the ones whose arrival was perceived only when their impact was undeniable. In warfare, espionage, commerce, even personal relationships, the true disruptors often dwell in plain sight, dismissed as ordinary until they orchestrate a transformation that reshapes the entire landscape. And precisely that scenario is unfolding here now. Somewhere within the labyrinthine corridors of their machinations, they're grappling with a disconcerting realization, revisiting every interaction with you, and experiencing an almost farcical dread as they mutter, "Wait, they were the key all along." It's dawning on them with the force of revelation, an undeniable truth addressed directly to them. Here's an insightful observation for you. Studies in the realm of social psychology reveal a prevalent human inclination to misinterpret genuine humility as a deficit of competence. This implies that while you maintained your composure, they categorized you as insignificant. Yet far from being harmless, you were assiduously accumulating expertise, nurturing connections, and cultivating insight until you emerged as the pivotal element required to complete the grand design. Thus, the tables have turned. The supporting character in their narrative has ascended to the leading role. The name they scarcely recalled now dominates their thoughts. And the most agonizing aspect, your emergence into this pivotal moment was not a sudden occurrence. You have been present all along, observing, absorbing, and quietly maneuvering while they disregarded your potential as a matter of habit. Prepare yourselves, because in the ensuing moments we will dissect the reasons behind their profound dismay at the revelation of your significance and why they may never fully recover from the ramifications of this altered reality. Number 1, they misinterpreted your trials as insignificance. For a prolonged period, they witnessed your navigation through challenging circumstances and concluded that you warranted scant attention. In their limited perspective, an individual of genuine potential would not encounter such persistent obstacles merely to sustain themselves. They scrutinized your adversities and construed them as evidence of weakness, misfortune, or an inherent inadequacy for any consequential endeavor. What they failed to comprehend was that your tribulations were not indicative of failure. Rather, they constituted the very crucible that forged you into an unstoppable force. While they marginalized you, you acquired skills that their sheltered existence rendered unnecessary. You cultivated patience during prolonged periods of closed doors. You honed your strategic acumen amid scarcity of resources. You mastered the art of improvisation when confronted with unforeseen deviations. And all of this metamorphosed into an imperceptible advantage indiscernible to them due to their preoccupation with superficial judgments. Ironically, they conflated a delayed spotlight with an absence of intrinsic potential. They erroneously equated success with uninterrupted triumph and effortless progression. However, the individuals who endure are those capable of weathering storms without losing sight of their objectives. Your unwavering commitment to persevering despite adversity did not diminish your significance. It transformed you into a formidable entity. They failed to grasp that your perceived setbacks were in reality preparing you to flourish in environments that would overwhelm most. You evolved into an individual capable of navigating chaos with unwavering precision. And because your triumphs transpired behind the scenes, they underestimated the extent of your development. Now the dynamic has shifted. The very resilience you cultivated during those challenging periods is the foundation of your strength, while some who once appeared invulnerable are now floundering. They possessed comfort, you possessed resilience, and resilience invariably endures. The realization confronting them now is elementary yet devastating. What they dismissed as irrelevance was in fact preparation. The battle they believed would break you was in reality constructing you. And now that you have attained the position they deemed unattainable, they must confront the reality of their misjudgment, a reality that cannot be undone. Number 2, their preoccupation became your training ground. They were so consumed by competing with one another that you barely registered on their radar. Their attention was fixated on their personal rivalries, their individual insecurities, their relentless pursuit of superiority. In their scramble to assert themselves, they utterly neglected you, and that oversight constituted the most consequential error they could commit. While their focus was scattered, yours remained laser-focused. You were not distracted by ego-driven skirmishes or trivial one-upmanship. You were diligently honing your skills, acquiring knowledge of the game, and quietly accruing advantages. This afforded you an invaluable opportunity, the space and time to mature without intrusion. They did not scrutinize your actions, thus remaining ignorant of your methods and thought processes. They failed to invest the time to comprehend your approach or your mindset because they were convinced you were an inconsequential variable. That blind spot served as your training ground. Every stride you took, every piece of knowledge you absorbed, every connection you cultivated transpired under the veil of their inattention. Competition breeds vulnerability. It renders individuals predictable, careless, and myopic as their primary focus shifts to outperforming each other rather than safeguarding the collective objective. That is where you seized your opportunity. You possessed the autonomy to master skills they did not even recognize as necessary. You familiarized yourself with the intricacies of the system while they preoccupied themselves with projecting an image of competence within it. You identified the loopholes, discerned the patterns, and recognized the subtle nuances that ultimately determine success. Best of all, because they never perceived you as a threat, they neglected to erect any defenses against you. They established barriers for those they feared and devised strategies for those they envied. But in your case, they left the door wide open. Consequently, when your moment arrived, you did not need to overcome resistance. You simply entered and assumed your rightful position. The reality is now dawning on them. The person they disregarded proved to be the one they should have been observing all along, and the sting is amplified by the impossibility of rewriting history. They cannot undo the years squandered in fighting futile battles while you transformed yourself into the individual capable of stepping in and assuming leadership without apparent exertion. Number 3, you surpassed those who initially overshadowed you. The individuals they once elevated to pedestals, the ones who appeared invincible and destined for triumph, have already receded into obscurity. Their brilliance burned intensely for a brief period, but it proved unsustainable. Their momentum derived from accolades, from perpetual validation, from an insatiable desire for the limelight. And when that attention waned, so did their fortitude. Meanwhile, you persisted in your endeavors, continuing to build and to persevere even when unobserved. You did not require external affirmation to sustain your efforts, which is why you outlasted them. Your journey was not a race against them. You were simply constructed for endurance. They approached their paths like sprinters, swift, flamboyant, but incapable of maintaining the pace. You, on the other hand, mastered the art of navigating setbacks, delays, and periods of apparent stagnation. You cultivated an internal reservoir of motivation that did not deplete merely because conditions were unfavorable. That level of resilience is uncommon, and it is precisely what distinguishes those who generate ephemeral acclaim from those who leave an indelible mark for generations. They utilized their opportunities as stages for performance. You utilized yours as foundational elements. Each challenge you confronted added another layer to your resilience. Each incremental advancement represented an investment in a grander vision. While they pursued recognition, you prepared for longevity. Consequently, when the initial surge of enthusiasm surrounding them dissipated, they were left without a solid foundation. You conversely possessed a foundation so robust that time and adversity could not undermine it. What is resonating with them now is not merely the fact that you endure. It is the fact that you are stronger than ever. You did not simply survive. You continued to advance while they faltered. They recall their unwavering conviction that you would never catch up, and now they must witness your ascent without having adhered to their established protocols. It is a reality they cannot distort, deny, or control, because the irrefutable proof lies in your continued presence and their relative absence. Outlasting them was not about defeating them at their own game. It was about participating in an entirely different endeavor, one predicated not on instantaneous victories, but on unwavering consistency. And now they are confronted with the unsettling truth. The person they anticipated would fade into oblivion is the only one still in contention. And there is no possibility of catching up to you now. Number 4, you were not competing. You were positioning yourself. They assumed you were engaged in the same pursuit. They measured your progress against theirs, secretly hoping to surpass you. In their perception, every action you undertook contributed to an imperceptible scoreboard where they meticulously tracked who held the lead. But in reality, you were not even participating in that competition. Your trajectory was not about dominating them. It was about aligning yourself with a purpose greater than their limited conception of success. Their superficial accolades, their fleeting applause, their transient victories. None of it was relevant to the mission you were undertaking. While they were fixated on securing immediate gains, you concentrated on constructing something immune to the allure of fleeting trends, promotions, or public commendation. You remained impervious to the distractions of comparison because you understood that your role was not to compete but to prepare. Every action you executed possessed weight and intention, even if it appeared insignificant to them. That is why their triumphs and defeats never affected you. Their scoreboard was inconsequential to your endeavor. They failed to recognize that positioning differs from competing. Competing entails striving to outperform another within the same arena. Positioning entails discerning your destined location and aligning yourself with the optimal timing, resources, and connections to facilitate your arrival. Sometimes that necessitates slower progress. Sometimes it involves allowing others to prevail in battles you were not destined to fight. From their perspective, it appeared as though you were conceding. In actuality, it was strategic patience. Now they are beginning to recognize the disparity. Their victories, while ostentatious, possessed limited longevity. The doors they so vehemently fought to open led to chambers that eventually emptied. Meanwhile, you have entered a realm they cannot touch, not because you surpassed them, but because you never aspired to reach their destination. What stings them most is the realization that all their energy expended in attempting to defeat you was futile because you were traversing a path beyond their comprehension. Your alignment with your purpose has positioned you in a realm impervious to competitive pressures and unattainable through mere ambition. And now that you have arrived, they cannot ignore the fact that you were never lagging. You were simply being positioned all along. Number 5, they failed to comprehend you, leading to misinterpretations. They struggled to decipher your actions, inducing unease. Individuals similar to them are accustomed to rapidly assessing others, categorizing them, and determining the appropriate course of action. However, you provided them with insufficient data to work with. You did not adhere to predictable patterns of behavior. You did not openly broadcast every triumph, elucidate every decision, or strive to substantiate your worth. And because you did not visibly pursue approval in the manner they did, they concluded that you must lack competence. In their perception, visibility equates to value. If you were not fervently pursuing every opportunity or striving for recognition, you must be unprepared, disconnected, or insignificant. What they failed to recognize was that you operated according to an entirely different paradigm. You did not require constant affirmation to validate your progress because your focus was not directed toward the crowd. It was directed toward your plan. You understood that the most vocal individual in a room is often the least strategic, and you had no desire to generate noise when you could instead cultivate precision. The reality is that while they were preoccupied with satisfying their need for recognition, you were executing maneuvers beyond their conceptual framework. You were not reacting to prevailing trends, you were preparing for outcomes they did not even deem possible. Every action you undertook was calculated to contribute to a larger design, one that did not necessitate their endorsement or even their comprehension. Their misinterpretation of you proved advantageous. By underestimating you, they granted you the latitude to operate without interference. They did not prepare for your emergence. They did not defend against your advances, and they failed to anticipate your arrival. Consequently, when the results of your strategy materialized, they were utterly unprepared. Now they recognized that the indicators were present all along, the quiet assurance, the unwavering consistency, the refusal to succumb to transient enthusiasms. But because you did not adhere to their established blueprint for success, they conflated your silence with ignorance. That oversight cost them more than they will ever acknowledge, because by the time they realized you were not ignorant, you had already progressed too far for them to overtake you. Number 6, your consistency served as silent testimony. They failed to recognize the value of the incremental, consistent steps you were taking because they were preoccupied with grand gestures and dramatic victories. In their estimation, success revolved around moments that elicited applause, public displays that proclaimed, "Observe me." They believed that the only means of proving oneself was through explosive breakthroughs witnessed by all. But while they pursued applause, you demonstrated your commitment quietly, consistently, without fanfare, thereby constructing something they could not rival: an impeccable record. Consistency lacks allure, which is why they disregarded it. It does not generate headlines. It does not command instantaneous attention. It is a form of labor that appears imperceptible until the results become undeniable. You did not bypass stages. You did not vanish when circumstances became inconvenient. You performed the required tasks even when unobserved. And that created a foundation so resilient that nothing they hastily assembled could compare. While they sought to prove themselves in bursts, you proved yourself through recurring patterns of behavior. You were not present solely for moments of public significance. You were present for all the moments that mattered in reality. And over time, those consistent actions conveyed a narrative more compelling and credible than any singular ostentatious achievement could ever convey. Individuals may have initially overlooked it, but recurring patterns are difficult to disregard once fully revealed. Now, when they reflect, the evidence confronts them directly. They can trace your path and observe that you did not materialize out of nowhere. You have been engaged in this process consistently for an extended period. That history speaks for itself. It reveals that you were not fortunate. You were not granted special privileges. And you were not merely in the right place at the right time. You were the one diligently performing the required tasks day after day, thereby constructing something that could endure. And here is the inescapable truth. Consistency prevails in the long term because it transcends fleeting enthusiasm. Their grand moments may have sparked brief periods of excitement, but your consistent performance generated undeniable credibility. In retrospect, it is apparent that you were the pivotal individual all along, not because you generated the most clamor, but because you never ceased to persevere. Number 7, you were the bridge they did not anticipate requiring. They dedicated so much effort to behaving as though you were inconsequential that it never occurred to them they might one day require your assistance. You were not part of their inner circle. You were not their preferred resource. And you were certainly not the individual they boasted about knowing. In their perception, you were merely present, an individual easily overlooked because you did not conform to their definition of importance. But while they overlooked you, you acquired skills, knowledge, and relationships they did not even recognize they lacked. Then the vulnerabilities in their meticulously constructed world began to manifest. Plans began to unravel, connections dissolved, and the individuals they believed they could depend on vanished when circumstances became challenging. That is when the realization dawned on them. The very individual they had dismissed was the only one capable of reconstructing everything. You possessed the experience, the perspective, and the adaptability to navigate the chaos in which they were drowning because you had silently prepared for such scenarios long before they occurred. The truth is that you did not merely appear during the crisis. You had been positioned there for a specific purpose. While they relied on charm shortcuts and superficial solutions, you learned how things actually operated. You understood the systems, the processes, and the deeper connections that sustained everything. You became the bridge between chaos and order, not because you sought to prove yourself, but because you were equipped to accomplish what they could not. What pains them most is that they cannot rewrite history. They cannot erase the fact that they disregarded you when you could have been an asset from the beginning. They cannot undo the instances in which they underestimated you or treated you as though you had nothing to offer. And now they must accept the reality that without you, their plans stall. Their connections disintegrate and their influence falters. Being the bridge is not about becoming the hero they finally acknowledge. It is about being the individual capable of standing where no one else could. And deep down, they recognize that this is what renders you irreplaceable, the fact that when everything was collapsing, you were the one holding it all together. Number 8, you defied conventions they did not even recognize as restrictions. They navigated life adhering to conventions they never questioned, conventions not explicitly documented but enforced through pressure, fear, and the assertion that this is how things are done. These were not mere guidelines. They were invisible constraints that confined everyone to the same limited domain. They labeled it tradition, professionalism, or the established rules of engagement. But in essence, it was control masquerading as order, and while others acquiesced, you possessed the audacity to inquire why. That single inquiry differentiated you from the rest. You did not blindly adhere to the script. You observed the extent to which what they referred to as the system was merely a collection of habits and power dynamics intended to maintain the dominance of certain individuals. And rather than accept it, you began to operate differently, not recklessly, but deliberately. You abandoned methods that lacked logic, even if they were established as the customary practice. You disregarded hierarchies that existed solely to inflate egos. You circumvented traditions that were nothing more than recycled limitations. By doing so, you unveiled avenues they did not even know existed. You discovered unconventional paths, unseen opportunities, and innovative solutions inaccessible to those confined by conventional thinking. That is why you occupy a position inaccessible to them. They have never even considered questioning the barriers that excluded them. What unsettles them now is that you did not merely bend the rules, you exposed the fact that those rules were not immutable. And once that truth is revealed, it transforms everything. They cannot revert to believing the limits are real, and they cannot deny that you were the one who demonstrated it. This is why you are equipped to lead the transition. They are not. They remain entangled in the politics, the traditions, and the power struggles that kept them secure but stagnant. You are liberated from those constraints, which empowers you to progress more rapidly, think more expansively, and make decisions unencumbered by false precepts. They were loyal to the constraints. You defied them, and now you are leading the way. Number 9. They evaluated you according to their standards, not your assigned purpose. They judged your progress using their scoreboard, assuming their metrics of success were the sole measures of significance. In their estimation, triumph entailed possessing visible status, accumulating wealth, and being surrounded by individuals who validated you. And because you did not pursue those objectives at their pace or according to their methods, they concluded that you were lagging. In their assessment, you were proceeding too slowly, missing opportunities, or simply lacking sufficient ambition. What they failed to comprehend was that your life was never intended to conform to their blueprint. You were not destined to compete for the same prizes they valued. Your timeline was not designed to impress an audience. It was designed to fulfill a calling, one governed by an entirely different temporal framework. While they sprinted toward immediate gains, you progressed in alignment with something that cannot be hastened or evaluated through superficial milestones. Their error consisted of equating delayed visibility with a lack of progress. They did not recognize that while they sought applause, you were constructing something capable of withstanding the test of time. Their metrics were transient. Yours were enduring. They prioritized projecting an image of success in the present. You prioritized becoming unshakable for the future. And because they only measured what was visible, they overlooked the profound transformations occurring behind the scenes. The irony is that their lead is illusory if it culminates in a dead end. Many of the acquisitions they fought so diligently to obtain are already losing their luster. Some of the doors they forced open led to empty chambers. Meanwhile, you are assuming positions and embracing opportunities that cannot be usurped because they were not founded on fleeting trends, sensationalism, or public endorsement. Now they recognize the uncomfortable truth. They have been comparing you to their race, failing to realize that you were running in an entirely different direction towards something enduring. They were fixated on the present. You were anchored in eternity. And because your purpose is inextricably linked to something greater than their standards, no amount of judgment from them can alter it. They believed you were behind, but in reality you were precisely on schedule, albeit not theirs. And now that the results are becoming evident, their measuring stick appears woefully inadequate. Number 10. They acknowledged your lack, but disregarded your leverage. They were quick to enumerate everything you lacked: the capital, the endorsements, the network, the influence. So to wrap it all up, remember this: you are powerful beyond measure. Don't let anyone's underestimation dim your light. Your journey, your resilience, and your unique perspective are shaping something extraordinary, even if it's not always visible. Embrace the quiet strength you've cultivated and know that your time is now. I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever experienced being underestimated? What lessons have you learned from it? Please share your stories, ask any questions you have, or just join the conversation in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please consider subscribing so you won't miss out on future insights and discussions. Let's keep empowering each other to step into our full potential. Thanks for watching, for watching, for watching, for watching, for